Ladies and gents, Pete Clark, Samuel, Dulamuel, coming at you with this ongoing coverage of the Robbi versus Garrett controversy saga. We want your take. We're going to give you ours. Everything we say in this show is our own opinion. We're going to be going through a little bit of Mr. Joey Ingram's footage to critically analyse some of the interviews and things from last night. What do we all think? How we doing? Sam, how's your morning going?
Yeah, pretty good. Just told you before, I think I'm getting a cold, but that's just the way it is. Nothing's going to stop me chatting about this. I've been engrossed in this since it happened. I've watched so much footage, mate. It's hilarious.
Yeah, we had it on in the living room last night, and even my girlfriend was like, she got really into it and stuff and started to form opinions and things. We were going to be watching something on Netflix, but we ended up just having that on for most of the night because it truly is. It's enthralling, it's engrossing. And yeah, I'm really interested to see what the community thinks. I'm interested to give you my own thoughts, guys, which completely U-turned yesterday. I don't know if we even need to sort of say what this drama is about. I think everyone's kind of already going to be well aware of it, but really, really quickly, in a very, very strange hand that was played on the Hustle Live stream, we had a spot where Robbi Jade Lou, who is a pharmaceutical entrepreneur, I think she's a CEO or co-director or something of a big like Californian pharmaceutical company that's like working on cannabis toothpaste and things of this nature, is what I gathered last night. And she has taken a sabbatical, like a year out of what she's doing to play poker. She's come into the live poker scene, been playing some tournaments, been getting a little bit of coaching, and sort of started dabbling and getting really into it. She's been invited onto the Hustle Live show, and I believe she has a friend, a guy called Rip, who's kind of been staking her and mentoring her a little bit, that's also been playing in that game. She got into a hand with OG of the show, Garrett Adelstein, who's known as like the guy, the pro, the one pro that gets invited to the game and gets to beat up on recreational players for millions of dollars. So it's good to be Garrett generally, but not so much right now because he is receiving a bunch of backlash for the way he has handled this situation, for the way he has accused Robbi of cheating him out of money by, I guess the implication is that he thinks that Robbi had access to what his cards were to some extent, enough to know to call off the rest of her chips with Jack 4 high in a spot where Garrett simply had an open end straight flush draw, had like an 8 high hand open end straight flush draw. Very, very bizarre call, very unusual. And this is what sparked the controversy. So that's where we are. Why don't we go through some of the main points that we went through yesterday on the YouTube video? So what Sam kind of did was he said, this is just a bit much, Sam, right? Like people are going off on a tangent too quickly. People are getting very tribal and divisive and polarized. And so you brought to the table 5 really concrete salient points and said, let's just start with the facts. Let's start with these 5 points. So do you want to talk about that a little bit? Do you want to talk about, first off, why you've decided to just bring 5 key points as a starting point instead of just like rushing to conclusions?
Obviously, looking on social media, watching a lot of the Joey investigations, people are very much, or most of the time, tie their flag to the mast and saying, I think this is what happened. And when someone does that, it involves a number of assumptions that we cannot be sure about. Most, if not all, of people's theories about what they think has happened can be true. But like I said, you have to make those assumptions. I'm looking at this the same way that a poker player would look at a hand. You know, you imagine this tree, you imagine the main branches, all the different possibilities that it can go to. Whereas most people are just on their own little branch saying, yeah, this is what happened. She did X because she thought Y, and then Z happened. Oh, well, what about this? Oh, yeah, but that can be because of this. It's like, okay, let's just look at the things that we do know for a fact. I just started sort of writing a few down, and I'm sure there's more, but there were 5 things that I thought, these are the only things we know are true. The first one is this hand is insane. This is an insane hand, right? There is no disputing that. I'm not going to, there's no point, I don't think anyone's really sort of made fun or criticized her strategy or the way she's thought about this in terms of, poker strategy. She's a new player. It's understandable. It's very, very feasible. She could have just simply absolutely butchered the hand.
It's interesting you say that though, because I think a lot of people are actually taking a stance right now that goes, it's too absurd for even a new player to even be able to make this play. Like I've heard people say things like, I could teach my gran poker today and she would never make that play. And I'm paraphrasing here, but like comments of that nature. What do you think about that then? Why do you think that this is a play that it's kind of expected that, or not expected, but it's reasonable for an inexperienced poker player to make? Bearing in mind, chat, that she did call off an immense amount of money, like the rest of her stack, with Jack High. Like it's not that she went all in or generated fold equity in any way. It was calling off the rest with a hand that appeared to have absolutely no showdown value. So let's hear your thoughts on that first.
I think it's completely unreasonable. I think it's almost 100% unrealistic. I think that's why she changed her story to, I thought I had a 3. Because this is the kind of play that you'll see sometimes from someone that has literally never played. And she's not that category. She's someone that started during lockdown. So she's been playing and like studying a bit for a year. So she's gone, this is the kind of play that, like, I once brought a friend to play at the pub a couple of years ago, and he had literally like basically never played poker. He did not know how to play. And he called 3 streets with a straight draw and called an all in on the river with a missed straight draw. Like he had like 9 high. And that's because he didn't know. He literally didn't know what he was doing. The play she made is basically equivalent to that. And I think you only really see these plays from total novices. She is a new player, but she still had coaching. She still played, some tournaments and, some tournaments online and WSOP events and stuff like that.
So I think everything you're saying makes a ton of sense, but I disagree. The reason I disagree is that I think under normal control conditions, like you're fairly correct on this, like most new players who have had a bit of coaching and played some tournaments and been around the block a bit, even if it's just for a few months, wouldn't make a play like that. But I do, like having watched the footage last night a lot more and having just seen it on loop, I think there is some history already developing with Garrett. I think that she feels, I don't know exactly what the dynamic is, but it became quite clear to me from Robbi's interview that whether or not she's guilty of what has been alleged here, she does feel quite a bit of animosity towards Garrett and probably vice versa. And I think when you're playing high stakes poker face to face and you're in a situation where you're constantly battling one player who you've developed a kind of feud with, a kind of rivalry with, it's very adversarial for humans, and it begins to trigger a lot of emotions that can very easily distort the truth about a hand, the logic of a hand, strategic thinking, that kind of thing. So I would say that, like, if I was dealt 8-4 offsuit under the gun, what are the chances that I would open that hand? Well, none. Like, what if I was tilted? Okay, still none. Well, what if I was like really, really upset about something and really like had lost like money I really needed and just felt like an insane urge to get it back? Maybe there's a world where my emotional state is such that despite all of my decades of experience, let's say, of like not opening 8-4 off under the gun or whatever it may be, there's still a world where I can do it. Now, I would argue that for a newer player, a lot of these rigid do's and don'ts, kind of like steadfast, healthy rules haven't been established, or at least they haven't, the neural pathways pertaining to them haven't been ingrained for very long. And thus, I would say it's very likely that when there's significant emotional turbulence, like I really hate this player, I think he's full of it, blah, blah, blah. I think a weak player can lose their mind temporarily. I think that the play that we saw Robbi make is a very, very bad play objectively for anyone that plays poker seriously. I think for a beginner, it's also a very, very bad play, but it's less of a very, very bad play for a beginner than it is for an experienced player. It's less of a shock. And so it would take less emotional interference for you to sink to a level temporarily, a kind of blindness, a temporary blindness where you could make that play. So So I do think that the way she's describing the hand afterwards does sound incredibly sort of tilted about it, like regardless of what's up. And to me, I just think it's very viable, having heard her kind of scatterbrained poker thoughts. She's obviously a very intelligent woman, but poker-wise, she's not experienced. She doesn't really know what she's talking about, to be totally honest. She sounds kind of completely ludicrous when she's talking about cards. And I think that's very hard to actually fake that if she does actually know more. So either what we're saying here is that she knows enough to never make that play and is therefore highly likely to be cheating. That's one thing we could be saying. I disagree with that, because I think the other side of the coin is, well, if that's the case, then she's actually presenting as someone that is bad enough to make that play, and she's doing an incredibly good job of like pretending to be worse at poker than she is. But then that doesn't make sense. Why would you do that while also coming up with these different stories? And just it's been so scatterbrained, like the way she's described the poker side of things. And that's what we'd expect from someone of her level who's also on tilt and is also triggered by a certain opponent or adversarial conflict. Where she hasn't been scatterbrained, where she's been very clear and consistent, in my opinion, has been on the non-poker side of things. What happened when Garrett confronted her, why she returned the money to him, how she is thinking about the stream, and, you know, she's grateful to the organizers and is on good terms with them and doesn't want to feel like she has been responsible in one way or another for their star player, for the guy that's bringing them a lot of views and money, quitting the stream and causing like some kind of controversy, and she doesn't want to be at the center of that. I think she's been very consistent there, but yes, in the hand it's been incredibly all over the place, but no more so than a very weak poker player would sound in their first coaching session with me or something like that. So I kind of disagree that this play is outlandish for someone of her level. I think her level is actually very, very low at poker, and I think that's something that works to her defense in this.
Firstly, just a quick point. I think she has changed her story about a couple of things away from the poker side of it as well. I think she's made out now that she didn't want to give the money or something like that, whereas Brian Feldman and Garrett have said like, oh, she's made out that she was like bullied into it when she wasn't. I think she originally said that she wasn't, but now she said she has. But that's just a side note. I get your point. I take that on board. I think that is a possibility for sure. I didn't see enough of the stream to know how much she was tilting. It feels like she's only tilting particularly against Garrett.
Right, exactly. In that moment, in that hand, that's where I think she was kind of losing her
That's quite
the plot
elite
a little bit.
It's quite elite to be like, there's a chance here that she was tilting enough versus this player in this spot to make this absurd call.
Not saying that. I'm just saying there's another side of this where if she is tilting to that extent and already has a really weak baseline with very scattered logic, then it's much less of a stretch to say that she could end up making a play like that. I'm not saying the tilt that was going on in her brain is sufficient for that play. I'm saying it does provide an alternative explanation other than she's cheating or she knew what his cards were or something like that. I think it's just it is an alternative.
But we've also seen her fold, a set on the river to a bet on a 4 flush board and stuff like that. I've probably seen her play for like a few hours. I watched a few hours of her play on the previous stream as well. I just had it on in the background, and my initial assessment was there, and it still stands, is that she's just a very passive player, like most new players are. And you're more likely to be passive and tighter if you're taking a shot at high stakes, especially. Even though she's fully bankrolled, she's free rolling. So that swings it the other way as well. That tilt has to also make up for the passivity as well. You've got this line of being like balanced.
Right, but it's not that she did this like 15 times. It's one hand it is possible to just get into a really adversarial, conflicting kind of place in a hand, not have much poker logic to guide you out of that or to be the sort of anchor or lighthouse in the storm, and then end up just making a really bad judgment in a moment. Like, people are saying things like, hold on, she wasn't down on the night. I don't understand why that has to be the case for you to get upset and, kind of...
like that.
Yeah, like I've definitely tilted in a live hand before, just because like I'm playing against Akshar, who like scares the shit out of me because he looks at me and knows what I have and stuff like that, Like I've definitely felt rattled during hands of live poker just because of like some random factor, and I wasn't tilted before then and wasn't even tilted after then. So I really don't get the narrative of like people can only be knocked off their normal thought process in the moment if they're down for the night or tilted for hours or something like that. I don't think that's necessary at all.
Okay, well then what about the hand that she had another Jack High decision versus Garrett when Garrett had the full house with Queen 4? It's the exact same spot. He overbets the river.
Yep.
And she throws in a time chip.
Right, because she's already feeling adversarial towards Garrett with my narrative, which is not like, I've not assumed her innocence completely. I do think she's innocent, probably. I haven't assumed her innocence completely, but it's just the same kind of thing. It's another hand against Garrett. We know they've got this rivalry. We know she's been speaking not so fondly of him. She says there's history before. Clearly there's an issue there, right? Like already outstanding. And it's another hand where Garrett is applying aggression. What do both of these hands have in common? She is being, in a poker sense or in her mind, ostensibly attacked poker-wise, like through aggression, from a player that she already feels threatened and intimidated and just not very good about. So it's the same thing. Both of those hands, the control situation is exactly the same. It's not like you've taken a hand against another player where she's thrown in a time chip in some spot where she wouldn't be at all antagonized. It's exactly the same pattern. It's Garrett.
Yep.
Like that's all I have to say about it.
And then, but the first one she gets right. Well, she gets both of them right. First one she folds, and the second one she gets right. It's a very low sample. It's two hands.
Yeah, but you can also
I'm just
say...
being devil's advocate here.
Sure. But you could also say with the first one, I mean, that would also have been completely absurd. Like, had she called the Jack High or raised the Jack High there, it would have been less absurd to raise the Jack High than call off the Jack 4 in the other hand. But still pretty crazy. And also there's this idea of tolerance where people have a certain... If something is triggering you, and you're easily antagonized or rubbed up the wrong way by something, you can tolerate it to a point. In doing that, your willpower will become depleted. And it's very possible that first hand, she's already throwing in a time chip because she's like, I hate folding to this man. This man is really antagonizing me. I don't want him to bully me. I don't, like, she's used to being like quite successful in her own line of work. Someone asked in the chat, why are you assuming she's intelligent? What does that even mean? Like, she's a CEO of like a successful pharmaceutical company. She comes across articulate. She comes across as very bad at poker, but intelligent out with that, in my opinion, right? So that's my answer to that question. I think when you're feeling like you're resisting the temptation to lash out randomly because you've got Jack 8 on the river and you don't know enough about the game to know that there's just no chance you can do anything there, and you're like, could I do something? No, your willpower's drained. Then you're in another spot where again you have nothing, and again this guy's attacking you and you feel vulnerable because you've got nothing and you don't like this man. I can totally see how it boiled over at that point and she did something completely stupid and absurd, poker-wise, because she just doesn't have the poker grounding to know to avoid that when she's extremely triggered. I think that timeline makes sense from that argument.
I think one thing that is very prevalent, and I think this is a really important point, one thing that's really prevalent in human behavior is that we often put another person down to make ourselves feel better. Mm-hmm. We may be conscious of that, or most of the time it's unconscious of that. Mm-hmm. So I think I just want to avoid like I'm not saying there's anyone's being toxic or anything like that. I'm talking about everyone out there commenting on this. The toxicity in this whole debate is completely avoidable, and proving your own point by putting the other person down, by putting, like, let's say, you believe that Garrett is correct. It's completely unhelpful to make your point about Garrett being correct by putting down Robbi. Like, it's just, and vice versa. This whole thing like, oh, he's been a crybaby. She read him like a book. Or, oh, she's just a complete idiot and she must be a cheat because she's doing shit in life or whatever. I don't know. So I think it's really important to avoid the toxicity and any kind of assumption that there's anything negative about either person. I think we should come from a place of like, they're both good people. They might not act great all the time. None of us do. But I think the most toxic thing about this situation, or the most relevantly toxic thing about this situation, would be like their poker rivalry that they have in game, their meta, and that's about as toxic as it should get.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very just normal and tribal for humans to like see there's like two opposing factions and jump on one faction and then the other one is your enemy and you have to like club them to death and take their land and their resources, and that's not exactly what's going on here. But it's the same instincts that drive it, and we are like that. We have to accept why we're like that and always stay aware of it. If we're vigilant that we do this, we can avoid it. And I agree, I've actually always thought that Garrett is a really respectable poker player and like a stand-up guy, and that's why, as you said yesterday, well, we're going to get to that point, right, aren't we? Like about Garrett standing in the community and what it means.
Yeah, well,
someone like him.
Point.
That's the third point, yeah. Okay, but let's finalize that. I agree with you, though. I think it's very important to give people the benefit of the doubt. I think it has to be innocent until proven guilty as well. I think people who are saying, oh, the burden of proof is on Robbi to show that she didn't cheat, that's just absurd, because like there isn't enough evidence in my mind for, well, that would never be the case. Either there's enough evidence to convict or there's not. Like, I don't think that's ever really a thing ethically to say we think you're guilty, show us you're not. How do you even prove a negative like that? Let's finalize the hand. I think it's unclear from the point of view of the hand on its own that any cheating has gone on. I think the hand is suspicious. It warrants an investigation. It's weird. It's dubious. I think it's very far from sufficient on its own, and I would leave it at that. Anything to add?
I agree with that.
Point number 2, what did you bring to
the table? Point number 2 was, we basically discussed it. She's a brand new player. We know that. That's another fact. Point number 3 is Garrett. We know that he is extremely well respected. He has like a spotless, I think I said yesterday, almost angelic reputation. I personally don't believe that as a balance. I think compared to her side of things being that, oh, she's just a fish and she soul read him, or whatever the argument is with Robbi. I think enough emphasis has been placed on the fact that we have very experienced, skillful, well-respected professional who is 100% concerned with this hand and feels like it's cheating. If Garrett is saying something is weird here, and I think this is obscene, and I think she has cheated, or I know she has cheated, we should be listening very, very clearly. We don't have to necessarily agree with him, but we should be thinking more about, right, okay, well, he's like the poster boy here. He's like our guy, like he's an OG. I think we should be listening to him more. I know he's not speaking as much or at all really to anybody.
I mean, what is there to listen to then? I mean, we listened to him when he said we think there's cheating. The guys that run the stream, is it Ryan and Mike? Is that their names, or have I made those up?
Ryan and Nick.
Ryan and Nick, yeah. So they've already launched the big investigation. They are taking it seriously. I think the poker world is taking it seriously. The fact that Joey Ingram is doing 10-hour, well, Joey just lives for that shit, right? But he's doing 10-hour investigative streams and things like that. There are people who really care about it showing up, and why do we really care about this? Because it's the spotlight of our industry right now, and I think it's super important that we do actually get to the bottom of it so that we can put out a verdict and actually show that we've handled it well. That's one thing, but yeah, what else is there to listen to with Garrett right now other than to investigate his claims and take them seriously? What else can we do? We can't be convinced. Listening to somebody's concerns and being convinced by their concerns being true are two completely different things, and I'm not sure we can leap to oh, she's probably guilty because Garrett's such a good poker player and he's such a good guy. He can be wrong. People are very fallible. Garrett's wrong in hands. He doesn't play everything perfectly. He can easily be wrong here, particularly if there is animosity between the two and there was already bad feeling, which clearly there was. Again, Garrett's not tilted in poker. Well, okay, maybe he's a bit tilted by the interaction with Robbi and her presence at the table in general and everything, but he's a good enough player that he's never going to let that seep into his play. Because she doesn't have that experience, she can let that seep into her play very easily. And that's, again, going back to my comparison earlier of how this play could have occurred. Someone asked us there, at what point does the hand become sufficient on its own? I don't think it really does. I don't think when you're dealing with a player that's so inexperienced, I don't think that can ever be sufficient evidence. I think the whole principle of that's just... I'm open to hear a counterexample, but I don't think so. I think Garrett has said his piece. He's then said nothing else, and I think it is being taken seriously. I don't think there should be more burden of proof shifting to Robbi, the accused party, just because Garrett's an OG and poster boy for the stream. I don't believe that for a second. I think that he's got no more weight in accusing somebody as anybody else does, although I do take your point that given that he's of a trustworthy nature, it just means that we can be sure that his concerns are genuine. He does genuinely 100% believe that he's been cheated by this lady in his hand. That doesn't mean that his concerns are less likely to be fallible. Has he ever been cheated before? What experience does Garrett have in being cheated and knowing what that feels like? I don't know. I'm not sure he's been involved in many dicey games where anyone's cheated him. Maybe I'm wrong, but...
Well, that's the thing. We should assume that someone like him probably has a lot more experience in all of this. He's probably a better judge than 99% of people with this situation.
I don't know. I disagree with that. I don't think that...
Really?
Cheating is very uncommon in... tournament poker, casino poker.
Private games.
He's probably played games where cheating has happened, sure. I just think it's very rare, and so even if you do play poker for a lifetime, there may only be a couple of instances where anyone's ever cheated you. It's not something you gather data on very quickly, in my opinion.
No, but you don't even have to have experienced it yourself. The more you play, the more you are entrenched in the culture of poker, in the community, the more stories you hear, the more friends you have that have experienced it as well.
Okay.
So you can experience cheating, via osmosis or whatever. You can have a friend or a friend of a friend having experienced it. So I'm not saying his opinion holds more weight. I'm just saying I think he's been sort of shrugged off more than I would have expected.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think most of the poker community numerically have been very negative towards him, which I'm quite surprised. I think a lot of the more experienced and humble, more senior pros, whether they agree with him or not, have been a lot more understanding towards him. But I'm absolutely shocked that so many people have just had this oh, he's a crybaby. Oh, come on, this guy's given the best seat in the whole of poker to play. These games are built around him, and he makes millions, and he should just suck it up. It's that's not the point.
No,
really.
it's
not the point at all.
It's got nothing to do with it. Yeah.
But I am surprised. I'm surprised about the low proportion of support and understanding that he's received, whether they agree with him or not. Maybe part of that is to do with the fact that he's just sort of gone and made this accusation and gone sort of back into his shell.
Yeah. I guess though he doesn't really, he's not an extremely public, even though he's a public figure, he's not a public figure for reasons outside of poker. Okay, he went on Survivor once, it didn't really go well for him. But apart from that, I don't think he's been massively in the limelight for non-poker reasons. I could be wrong, but I don't think that's really his style.
No, I think that's conscious. Yeah, I think I actually thinking about it, I remember watching the stream and he was saying at the table that his closest friends are outside of poker, and that's a conscious decision from him. I think he actually consciously, apparently this is what I heard, maybe it's different, but I remember him talking to someone at the table. It was really interesting to listen to. He made a conscious decision not to have his closest friends within the poker community. Not to say that he doesn't have close friends, I'm sure he does, but within the community. But I think he, what's the word when you...
he wants like a bubble of like work life, professional life, and then personal life.
Yeah.
Which makes a lot of sense why he's not going on shows, getting involved on Twitter battles, right? I mean, it's good to avoid those things anyway, like innocent or guilty, in the right or in the wrong as the accuser. I think anybody that wants to protect their own mental health is advised to stay out of it. And that's the other thing, like, these are two humans. Like, I think if Robbi is innocent and Garrett still has, you know, very justified reason for accusing, which possibly he does, maybe it's just a travesty. Maybe it's just like two people's mental health gets fucked up and two people suffer. Like, if Robbi is innocent, but the signs all point to her being guilty, and the way she's handled the situation incriminates her further in the eyes of many people in the poker world, yet Garrett is fully justified in accusing her, right? Because he doesn't know for 100%, and it's very reasonable. If you're 99% confident that someone is cheating you, it's extremely reasonable to accuse them. I think we'd all agree with that. So there is a very legitimate possible world out here where Robbi is innocent and Garrett is still in the right to make the accusation based on the way the situation looked at the time. And therefore, why do we have to condemn Garrett just because Robbi's innocent? Okay, if he's accused her based on an absolute whim, based on no evidence, then fair enough. But I think we would all feel like that's the right thing to do for us if we were that confident we'd been cheated. So I think the way he's acted in accusing her is completely normal. But what do you think about the way that he's been?
He's very certain, isn't he? He's 100% certain that she's cheating.
Yes, I think that's the problem I have with it, is that I think it would be better to say, this looks dicey, I am uncomfortable, can we please do an investigation? Taking the money back and stuff like that at that point, I just feel like, how can you be that certain? You don't have any proof. I think he's letting his emotions make decisions for him in that case, and I don't blame him. It's an extremely emotive situation, but I think that's what's happened to a large extent.
I actually think his reasoning for taking the money back was not emotional, because he felt like he was 100% certain. He said, like, this is going to be the only opportunity that I'm going to take the money back, so it makes sense for me to just take it now. The problem I have is that he has to be 100% certain to make this accusation. If he isn't, then he's definitely gone about it the wrong way. Even if he's 99% sure, like, he has to know, like, it's only going to pan out for him really well if he's sort of biding his time, resting emotionally, doing whatever he needs to do whilst he's out of the spotlight. He now has to come back and say, right, I know she's cheating, and here is the evidence. I mean, I don't know how likely that is. If that doesn't happen, then he needs to apologize about some things for sure.
It's kind of scary because, like, you can't really prove a negative, and if there's no evidence he's actually cheating, then she will be mostly exonerated by the poker world, although there will still be people who claim that she's guilty and cling on to that belief, and they're entitled to their opinion. But in that case, it's really a shame, because I don't think this will get resolved. There won't be proof either way. And
well, he has to prove that she has a device. He has to literally
absolutely.
Like, this is the device. Yeah.
I mean, he has to prove that she's cheated in one way or another, definitively. But what I'm saying is, if he doesn't do that, I don't think the poker world will entirely let her off the hook. There'll still be a lot of people with animosity towards her. So I think this is the problem I have with outright accusing somebody with no concrete evidence, is that if you're wrong, and you may actually be wrong, this might just be a very bad poker player who's been quite tilted in the moment and has like lost control of her thoughts a little bit, then, you know, you've kind of brought a lot of disrepute to this person's life and career in poker and future in poker. And also people like Magnus Carlsen, people like whoever the big fishing guy is, no idea, people like Garrett Adelstein need to understand that they carry a lot of weight, and with great power comes great responsibility. I believe that's a quote.
It's very true.
Okay, what is point number 4?
Point 1, the hand's insane. Point 2, she's a brand new player. Point 3, Garrett and his reputation. Point 4, she's changed her story. The amount of time she's changed her story, and she's trying to justify it as like, well, I think sometimes she's justified it as being tilted maybe, and sometimes she's justified it as a skill. And then, you know, did she hero call? Did she like make a good bluff catch with a 3? What is it? The fact is, I'm not interested to try and find out what she thought she had. It doesn't matter to me. All I know is that she's lied. There's lies here. I don't need to know the truth. There are lies. And that is not a good look. That's sort of cheaters lie, right? The flip side to that is that embarrassed people flip-flop around. It just adds to the confusion, I guess. But she has changed her story.
I think it's fair to say that after the hand, she was clearly in a very clearly to make, okay, if she's innocent, right, and this is hypothetically, but I think as long as I can put forth a consistently reasonable explanation that doesn't contradict itself, that explains her behavior and her play at the same time in that moment, then I think that's like good for her. And I'm going to try to do that. Not that she'll likely watch this particular interview, but I'm going to try and do that just for the benefit of explaining my thought process to you guys. So I've already said that it's my belief that if she's innocent, this is, right, assuming her innocence for now, that she was very tilted, very sort of haywire during the hand, scattered thoughts, emotional interference, all of that stuff going on, yeah? So then after she makes the play, let's say that she did think that she had a 3 at some point, which would have been bottom pair. That's kind of an embarrassing thing to want to admit when you've just felt extremely vulnerable. Like, you've just done something insanely aggressive and insanely, like, combative because you felt under attack from Garrett. Like, you're threatened by him, his presence, his poker prowess, his influence, whatever it may be. So after the hand, when the whole table is looking at you and you've just had to roll over a hand that is pretty ridiculous, right? Ridiculously weak, you would be scrambling and you'd be all over the place. And her... if she was cheating, I really believe that she would have some kind of explanation already prepared that she would have thought about during the hand or would have thought about in advance. If you're going to cheat on such a high-profile, high-stakes game with the world watching, surely you've got something prepared, unless you're a total idiot, and she just isn't, right? I just don't think she is. I really feel that when she's scrambling all over the place and floundering about, by far the most natural explanation to me for that it's just that she is continuing to feel under the spotlight. She's continuing to feel vulnerable, like a fish out of water or whatever, and is just trying to say whatever comes to her head to like make her to claw back some dignity, respect, some kind of self-image, something like that. I think that's a more likely explanation than, you know, she cheated and then she came up with like 4 different random lies like right after the fact. Like a really bad criminal. That's like going in to rob a bank and like you have a gun, but actually you've picked up a toy gun instead of the real one, or some mistake that's like that ridiculous. I don't know. I just don't buy that.
If she's cheating, why do you assume she'd be good at cheating? Why can't she be a bad cheat?
Because everything she said out with poker, the only place where she has sounded silly and ridiculous is when trying to talk strategically about poker. When she has talked about outside of poker, when she is talking to Sean Deeb, talking to Joey Ingram in the stream, talking about what she does, talking about her poker journey, things that aren't strategic, she's extremely coherent and solid with what she says, and she's very convincing, I have to say. And I think if she's lying in those instances, then she's a very, very good liar, and that does not at all gel with her reaction right after the hand, which was scatterbrained. But the reason it was scatterbrained, in my opinion, is that she's still within the realm of poker at that point. She's still trying to say strategic things, so they come out as dog shit. The stuff she's saying outside of poker does not come out as dog shit. It comes out very coherently.
Okay, but I think that you're saying, like, if you're going to cheat, surely you would have something prepared. Because she is a new player, her analysis of poker is very scattered and jumbled. So I think it's unlikely she'll be, because she can't think about poker in a sort of linear way, streamlined way. I think it would actually be difficult for her to work out what she was going to say if she was to cheat, because she can't do it when she's telling the truth either. So
that's fair.
What for me, if she misread her hand, like I can't imagine anyone not, when she turned over her hand, I can't imagine anyone not being shocked and going, oh shit, I'm so sorry, I thought I had a 3. Everyone does that. It's so unlikely that she thinks that she misread her hand and then turned it over and just sort of stood still and then immediately instinctively went into like, yeah, it's not about what you have, it's about what I think you don't have.
Unless she thinks that misreading her hand is like a really embarrassing thing to do.
Sure.
Actually, it's not to us. Like, I would rather lose a pot through misreading my hand than getting outclassed or making a blunder, of course. But to a new poker player, maybe she thinks that misreading her hand is really, really embarrassing. Like, it's a rank beginner error, and she doesn't want to come across like that in front of these people. Also, our new players who are emotional and not really used to playing in this environment, especially with like, you know, the whole animosity thing with Garrett, are they not more likely to misread their hand? Especially since she literally had Jack 3 a couple of hands ago, right? Like very recently. She did.
She checked the hand a number of times. I just find it unlikely. I'm saying that when you go, oh shit, I thought I had a 3, that's also coming from a place of embarrassment, right? Either way, she's coming from a place of embarrassment. You can go one of 2 ways. You can either do the thing that happens nearly always, like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I misread my hand. Or you can have the reaction that she had, which was like, actually, yeah, I just sold Reggie. You know, you're not the only one that can be lucky. You know that. So you can split into one of those two options, and it's just so much more likely that you go for the, oh my god, that's like, that's insane that just happened. She should be as shocked as we are. She didn't seem to be.
No,
Uh,
but I think she's trying to present some illusion of control. Like, I think her whole
that's really
fear.
difficult to do. Like, she controlled it immediately then.
No,
That is
she
what
she
you're
didn't
saying.
control it at all. She came across as completely out of control. Her thoughts were scatterbrained, but she was trying to sound like a
Right,
poker
yes.
player. Her whole discomfort originates from not being good at this thing that these people are good at and playing against the top guy. And that's
Sure,
what's made her so
intimidation.
vulnerable in the first place. So it's natural that when she wins this hand through misreading her cards, that her first thought is to try and talk strategy with the big boys and not admit that she made the absolute rank beginning mistake of misreading her hand, like surely something that no good poker player possibly ostensibly in her mind would ever do. So I actually can see why the rambling kind of trying to talk strategy would be a defense mechanism there, because it's not really about the money to her, I don't think. Like, she's very wealthy, right? And winning that pot, I don't think it really mattered to her financially that much. I think it was more about the ego battle, like besting Garrett. And I think that's what it all comes down to. In my mind, it's actually quite consistent that if she was in this tilted mental place that I have to put her in to give her the possibility to make that play in the first place, then I wouldn't expect any kind of coherence out of that. I know that if she was playing the hand, if she hasn't cheated, only a scatterbrained thought process would be expected after that showdown. It's very normal that she's flitted about the place there.
If you just retrace the hand even slightly, but if you go back to the beginning, you don't need to jump through those mental hoops. Like, it just seems even more obscure because you do see her check her hand a number of times. She'd have to misread her hand repeatedly. Mm-hmm. She'd have to be in a state of confusion constantly.
Which clearly my narrative suggests that she was.
Yeah, but you're still like, when you check your hand, that brings you back down to earth. You know, you can be like, oh my god, what do I do here?
Not necessarily. Have you ever been in a completely fight panic state that you have to hide from other people? Like, if you've ever been at the poker table and just felt pure pandemonium in your body and in your mind, I think you could be looking at your hand and not really taking it in. Like, when I'm stressed and I look at the time, I might have to look 11 times before I actually know what the time is. True story.
She did look repeatedly, is my point. So I agree with you that.
But is she looking, or is it a sort of nervous sort of acting?
She's just looking over
clearly.
And over again.
Is she looking, or is she going through the motions of looking? Do you know that she's actually looking? Do you know that her brain is cognizing?
What's more likely? She could see
it
a
depends.
Jack or
it depends.
She's so like fogged by tilt and emotion.
Well, if you accept that she may well be very, very fogged and have to be very fogged to make this play, then I don't think you have an argument, because then it's really normal to not be taking things in when you look at things and be in that kind of situation. I think by saying that it's much more likely that she is taking in what her hand is and that she's processing that, you're almost undermining the fact that she'd have to be in a completely pandemonium startled state in the first place.
I think it's unlikely she was fogged during the hand.
Well, okay, fine, but then you've already disagreed with my initial argument, right? So by that point, then it's kind of like...
I think it's a possibility, but I think she either cheated or she was consciously making a hero call and then realized afterwards from their reaction how absurd the hero call is. So she was like, well, no, actually, I did have a 3, which is more of a justified hero call, if that makes sense. I think she either cheated or she just made this totally obscene Jack High call consciously, felt pressure, etc. Like, that can't go away. They will be there. You know, someone says, do you have 3s?
She may have been advised as well by her friends to just tell, because the hero call is so outlandish, it's possible that someone that knows more about poker than her said to her, if you say that you had a 3, you'll have an easier time defending yourself here, knowing she's innocent, but just saying that to help her get a better defense. Just because you've lied doesn't necessarily make you guilty. I get it. It does undermine trust, and it should undermine trust. You're 100% right. Like, it should start to undermine trust right away when people lie. But when people are very panicked, lying is a very natural human defense mechanism. And like I say, my whole understanding of the spot, having watched this last night and having thought about it and having slept on it, is that she was in a very disturbed, like emotionally volatile, fight or flight mental place there. And I can totally see how, like, I look at my watch, I don't see the time, I look at my cards, I don't really notice whether it's a 3 or 4 properly. Maybe she's lying about the fact that she misread her hand, maybe she's not, but I don't think it's inconsistent with the mental place I have to put her in to find her innocent in the first place. And I do want to put her in that mental place more and more, just having seen her talk about poker after the fact.
But I think her having like jumbled thought processes about poker, it doesn't relate to her being tilted or emotionally unstable during the
No, I think both are necessary. I think both are necessary for that play to happen. And I think they do combine. They need to combine to make that play happen. I think they have combined.
Sure. But I don't think they're related. I don't think one like causes another necessarily. I don't think you're more likely to tilt because you don't know how to talk about poker in a streamlined way.
I think weaker players are more likely to tilt.
Just inexperienced.
Yes, exactly. But then
that's not being able.
No, but not being able to talk about poker in a streamlined way is evidence you're inexperienced, which then makes it more likely that you would tilt to that extent in that spot, right? It's a bit of a transient thing.
First point was that the hand's insane. We know this for a fact. We know for a fact it's an insane hand. We know for a fact, point two, that she's a brand new player. We know for a fact that Garrett is very experienced and has...
We know that she's a very weak poker player, let's say, right? Maybe not brand new. Like, why are we using brand new? What matters is how good she is, not how long she's been playing.
I'm being polite. Right?
No, but let's cut to the chase. What matters is her ability level, because that's what's coherent with how she's talking about the game. Because the reason you do need to be specific about that is that if you use the words brand new, you will have people, like someone in chat earlier, talking about how much coaching she's had, how many tournaments she's played, and stuff like that starts to like almost become relevant when it shouldn't be, I don't think.
Brand new is like an umbrella for like, I guess, a number of assumptions.
Right, but it's not factually true, is it? Like, she's been playing a fair amount of poker now. So it's not what's important.
She's been playing for a year. That's okay. She hasn't had much coaching. She hasn't done much study.
Just talk about her level, please. Let's just talk about her level. That's what matters. Like,
yeah, all of this means that she's a very bad player.
Okay, good. That's what helps. Okay. That's what helps us make sense of that point. Okay.
Point three, Garrett and his reputation. Point four, she's changed the story multiple times. Point five, she returned the money. We know that for a fact. She returned the money. Very, very relevant. The reasons for returning the money, everything about the money has been conflicted between both parties. Garrett says he never asked for it back. She said he forced her. She originally said that she offered to give it back out of respect for the production team and because she just wanted to carry on playing, and she was very confident.
So let's clarify what she meant by out of respect for the production team, because I think this comes across as a bit unclear at first. It did to me anyway.
I think that's all she said.
No. She went on to say that she was worried about being perceived to be responsible for causing offense to the star player, the poster board, billboard, Garrett Adelstein. Like, this is how she sees him. And she was worried that that would harm the Hustler Live production and that she would be responsible for that. That was her reason for giving back the money, that she actually didn't just give it back. She didn't just say, I feel awful, here's the money back. Oh no. She said, I'll give you the money back under the condition that you keep playing, because she didn't want to have driven him away from the table. So she actually made a deal with Garrett that he would keep playing. This is her account. That he would keep playing if she gave him the money back, and that's why she gave him back. She didn't want to disrupt the stream. And I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. I think that makes a lot of sense to me.
I think that deal she made for him to carry on playing as well, I think that was confirmed by Nick Viducci as well. I think
if you had cheated him out of money, would you want him to be sat at the table with you when he now suspects you? I don't think so.
Well, would you? Yeah, and would you want to carry on playing yourself?
Possibly not. No.
Or maybe again you go into that fight or flight where I've got to keep up this pretense.
That's just like, I think it's very unlikely that you would want to go back to table A, and that you would want to go back with Garrett given the way he's just acted and stuff like that. I think you'd feel very scared, and I don't think you'd be able to go and do that. I think the fact that she was just, let me keep the game going, let me not ruin things, let me not be responsible for this, it does make a lot of sense. That convinced me the most. That this is the point that when I first saw that she gave the money back, my initial reaction was again like, oh my god, so guilty, only a guilty person would do that. But when I actually heard her motivation for it, this is the point that convinced me the most of her innocence.
Yeah, so that's basically, those are the key points. There's probably others as well, but...
Yeah, if you were a cheater, I think you would have some hesitancy to give back the money because it would be such an sufficiently incriminating thing to do.
She has asked for it back, though, hasn't she?
Yeah, which is another really weird thing to do, incriminating. Well, maybe not, actually, if you want to prove your innocence. No, I can't say that. I can't say that. It's so hard not to be biased, man. I'm really struggling. Now that I think she's innocent, I'm just like being so biased, and I know I'm doing it, and I'm like, God, I wish I wasn't doing it. So I want to be objective. It's just
just have a go. Just start, just be.
I mean, I am trying to be fair. I just think I just don't see a lot of evidence in this part of the allegation that implies any guilt. I think this points a lot towards innocence, just objectively. But that was my strong opinion last night when I was watching the show. Like, maybe she's duped me. Maybe she's incredibly convincing and she's come up with a really good story for the external to poker parts of it, and that she's cheated. It's possible. I just think that it's very, very unlikely at this point, given how good a liar and just how utterly convincing she would have to be able to do that. Like, I was just watching it last night and my instinct was just like, no way. It was like, have you ever played Werewolf? A game where you like figure out who the goodies and the baddies are, and you vote to like lynch the people that you think are the wolves, and the wolves need to try and kill all the villagers. My instinct from playing lots of Werewolf I was a pretty good villager actually.
This is what it's come down to. This is what this whole
this is how I know she's innocent. I played lots of Werewolf, and I was usually a pretty good villager, and I was usually able to tell who the wolves were. I even played online Werewolf in a place called Flockturn River way back in the day. Shout out to anybody who played in those Werewolf games in that poker forum, because they were the fucking bomb. No.
What are we talking about here?
We're talking about the fact that she was so convincing that I just thought there's just no way this is a woman who is cheating and her still alive. And I think it's like 90-10.
I've got 2 points. Playing devil's advocate. First point is Mike Postle carried online, and there was like infinitely more evidence that he was clearly guilty, allegedly. So like people do double down, triple down.
No, it's just how convincing she is about it, though. In my mind, I wouldn't expect her not to triple down if she was cheating. Like, of course, but it's just the way she comes across. It was just utterly convincing. What can I say?
Second thing is, in poker, your reputation, your word is your bond, right? It's not like other industries where you can carry on working in them. You know, you can just get a job somewhere else and sort of hide off. Like, if you are seen as a cheat, that's it. That's you're done. I get the impression she like really enjoys poker, and she wants to get really good at it, and she's really enthusiastic about it, and she enjoys it. But she'll also be aware that if this pans out badly, she can't even walk into a casino and play 1-2. Can't even do that. She could only play online, basically. And even then, if people found out it was her, they might like start giving a shit. So there's more at stake in the poker community, career-wise.
So let me ask you then. Maybe you'll have an answer for this, but if she's very keen to become a really strong poker player and be known within the poker world and have a good poker reputation, why would she do it in the first place? Why would she risk her reputation in the first place then? Like, to get an accelerated head start or get limelight, I guess, could be one explanation.
Yeah, that's like a reason I can think of. But still, that's like a huge risk. Like, you're already on these streams. You've already been invited to play high stakes streams with Garrett and Andy and Phil Ivey. Like,
you're already going to get so much reputation. You've already made it. What value are you going to get by winning an extra buy-in or two instead of like finishing break even? Or
maybe she wants to be on the billboard. You know,
I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. And she's also got a reputation outside of poker. Like, this will filter into the mainstream. She's clearly like a well-connected person in business and pharmaceutical business. And if her reputation gets tarnished in poker in a really big stage like this, it's going to impact her career as well. It's going to impact absolutely everything. It just doesn't make sense why she would be risking all of that. Like, if she was like some, I don't know, random person that had no real stature that had just like made a connection within the industry and been brought into the game, I would feel like there was a bit less to lose. Or maybe she comes from like a place where she thinks she has to, you know, cheat to get ahead in life. If she's come from like a rough place where she's not had much money and she's just like made a connection, got into this game, the complete opposite is true. She's like been very successful and then has decided to take up poker as a passion. Just doesn't seem like the kind of person that would have any motive to cheat. It really doesn't.
Who knows? Maybe she doesn't have a choice. Maybe she's been forced into it. Again, super unlikely, but
I will say that like I'm not 100% sure, and I'm not going to sit here and be like, I'm going to campaign for this because I'm so sure. But I am going to go with a percentage now of 84%. I've brought it up from 80. I'm going to go for 84% innocent here, in my opinion, in the humble opinion of Pete the Carrot Man Clark. Sam, what percentage have you landed on at the end of our investigation?
I'm not sure. I think maybe 50-50, but I think it could be swaying towards innocence now. I think as the days go on, I'm sort of veering towards that. I don't know. It's all going to change when we hear from Garrett and the investigation and all that. But I think at the moment, like, it's probably like 50-50. If some kind of conclusion was to come out, like, breaking news, this piece of evidence has been found, I wouldn't be surprised either way what that evidence.
It's like I was saying to you yesterday, if I was all in on the flop against like a gutter and an overcard, and the gutter and the overcard got there. Well, let's say it's just a gutter, right? I've said like 85%-ish, right? So let's say they just have a gutter with some backdoor flush draw, and I lose. I'm not surprised. Poker's horrible. Fucks you over, right? Poker's a dick. So I'm just like, of course that happened. So if it comes out that she's guilty, and then my chat's like, oh, Pete, you were wrong. Because that's what they'll do. They'll be like, you were wrong there, mate. You were really wrong there, mate, weren't you, mate? Then I won't actually be that surprised. I'll be like, yeah, I mean, it's like a gutter and a backdoor, like it happens. But I would be very confident if you gave me 2-1 or 1-2 right now, I should say, that she was innocent. I would take it. I would take it.
We're going to put a bet down like we did.
I don't want to bet on this kind of thing at all.
No,
I wouldn't ever bet on. But yeah, I think we're very justified in saying I strongly think X, but I wouldn't be surprised by Y. I don't think that's a contradiction. I think that's a healthy standpoint.
If it came out she cheated, I'd be like, I knew it. And then if it came out that she's definitely innocent, I'd be like, yeah, that does make sense.
Mm-hmm. I think you're doing a good job of being really objective, and you're resisting the temptation to join the Twitter hordes and pick in allegiance and charge towards the enemy.
I love Garrett. Like, he's probably my favorite player. As far as I know, he's this... He's extremely lovely and humble. I actually met him when I went to Vegas.
Yeah, I saw the picture, man. That's nice. Yeah, no, I mean, he clearly is a very nice guy. I mean, I think he's
exactly the same. He was
maybe
really sweet.
Maybe he's not handled the situation as well as he could have. And I think one of the biggest points that I would like to get across, I'd like Carrot Corner to actually portray about this, is just that I wish we could learn from it that we need to handle things in a more careful, plodding along, step-by-step, evidence-based way, and not just suddenly assume that because we put our flag on one mast, as you succinctly put it, that we now know what's the case and everyone on the other side is wrong, everyone else on the other side is wrong. It's an extremely naive and toxic viewpoint.
Targeting like specific solutions, realizations, or whatever.
Yeah. It's this.
Yeah, this is what happened. Yeah, it went like this. Yeah, but what about that? No, it would have been like this.
Mm-hmm. But it happened in, like, I remember the independence referendum in Scotland, where 2013, right, and like people are discussing it. It's like the whole country is just. I'm sure in England you talked about it as well, but we talked about it understandably a lot more, I'd imagine. Mm-hmm. And everyone you spoke to, I'd say 3 out of 4 people had decided yes or no extremely early on in the process of the referendum and had spent their entire time campaigning by just twisting arguments and evidence to back up their point of view. I wrote an article for it back when my site wasn't just about poker, it was about like whatever I wanted it to be. It was like a blog, and the article was called the article was called like the 5 types of people who ruined democracy, and the first one was called a reverse voter, which is somebody who makes up their mind and then argues for it, rather than someone who weighs out evidence and then makes up their mind. You, as a voter, someone that like actually instantiates democracy in a good way, you want to be somebody who's making up your mind after deliberation, not before. And what we're seeing in these scandals in chess and poker, and probably in fishing, although who the fuck knows about fishing? No offense if you do.
I know one poker player that does actually.
Okay, well, anyway, old men coffee poker players that you met in the Hippodrome aside, it's extremely toxic to make up your mind first and then dedicate all your resources to making that seem to be the truth. That is crazy. It's like backwards in every single way, and people are doing it here as well.
And to go back to what you're saying about, you think it's important to think about this methodically from a foundational basis. But the point is, so much is like splintered off on tangents. So many people who have no idea what they're talking about are now triggered with other agendas. I don't want to go into those because I have no interest in it really, but the point is there are these other negative things sparking off from this, and I think it's important that if we keep it at a foundational level, we can minimize those as much as possible.
Yeah, it's so tied to like many issues that we're currently facing right now. Issues like gender stuff, issues about like how we use social media and how we are evolving as a species to handle the use of, or handle the fact that we can use social media. Are we using it responsibly? Are we really up to scratch ethically yet in how we use it? All these things are pertinent issues now, and they're brought to light by this, and so it's really hard not to go off on those tangents. But I think like issues like misogyny are actually irrelevant here, unless Garrett has taken her aside and been misogynistic to her or something like that. You will see people on Twitter being misogynistic about it. You will see people being over the top in the other way and like accusing and saying this whole thing is based on misogyny. Neither of these two things is really the right answer. And this isn't actually an issue about gender. This is an issue about cheating in poker. It's an issue about how we handle situations where we think someone's been dishonest and whether and how public we make it. I think those are the main issues. Gender is actually irrelevant. If you want to bring gender into it to further your own course, that's actually selfish. That's not what this is about until it becomes about gender, because Garrett or somebody else that's highly involved in it acts in that kind of misogynistic way, or the opposite happens, and Garrett gets arrested for misogynistic things or something like that, until it becomes about that, and it probably won't. Why are we making it about gender just because she's female? That's actually a backwards thing to do, is to bring gender into it for no reason, regardless of which side you're on, in my opinion. You can maybe say, how big a part has gender played here? You can analyze that after the fact, but there's no way that gender is relevant enough right now to be like a sole talking point or main talking point of this whole scenario.
What a mad hand, eh?
Yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, it's crazy. We'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you for joining us. I hope that we've been able to shed some light on it in an objective way today. And yeah, I do think that she's almost certainly, I do think she's very likely innocent. Sam isn't so sure. You can all have your own opinions, but we'll maybe check on this next week sometime. Have fun. And remember to play some poker as well. Poker still exists. Bye-bye.
See you later, guys.